Good morning. Buenos dias, Governor Newsom and distinguished guests. I'm Dr. Britt Rios-Ellis, and I have the honor of serving as the president of California State University Stanislaus. On behalf of our students, faculty, staff, and alumni, it's a pleasure to welcome you to our beautiful Turlock campus for this sixth stop on the California Jobs First Tour. Just to remind everyone, we also have a growing campus in Stockton, the only public four-year degree option in San Joaquin County, one of the fastest growing counties in our state. So one of the things for sure I hope you're seeing, even though the semester hasn't started, we're in winter semester, is that when Stan State thrives, the entire Central Valley does too. And as part of the CSU, we are so proud to be a strong driver in preparing California's workforce. Collectively, the CSU educates almost 500,000 students and produces nearly half of the state's bachelor's degrees, fueling key industries and driving economic growth and ensuring that the California population has access to great, well-trained nurses, teachers, and scientists, as well as those versed in the arts. We are not the largest CSU, but in many ways, we are the mightiest and the most broadly ranked. And there's some bookmarks out there to just give you a preview of what we've done. This year's accolades from the Wall Street Journal ranked us as the 9th best public university in the nation. Just to give you a clue, University of Michigan is number 8. We were also ranked 2nd in the nation for social mobility by the Wall Street Journal, 3rd by the U.S. News and World Report, and 4th by the Washington Monthly. Located in the Central Valley, we live and breathe social mobility, and the ROI of a Stan State degree is at the heart of our mission. Whether we're providing certification for community health workers, training small business folks in entrepreneurship, or providing full degree options, Stan State offers what is needed for job training for the underserved. Both our rankings and our range of offerings reflect the transformational engine that is Stan State. We positively impact our individual students, but also their families and their respective communities. From our McNair Scholars to Career Ready U and our Project Rebound for former inmates, we're blessed with the opportunity to catalyze lives and build opportunities. 73% of our students are the first in their families to attend college, and their success strengthens our state's economy, causing a ripple effect across the Central Valley, the state, and the nation. Through partnerships with agriculture, healthcare, education, and technology, Stan State is preparing the next generation of leaders and professionals while contributing nearly $1 billion annually to the region's economy. Today's conversation is about equitable access to quality jobs, protecting natural resources, and boosting the social economy that resonates so deeply within each of us. As Governor Newsom continues this important statewide tour ahead of the 25-26 budget, it's a reminder that education is one of the most impactful investments we can make in California's future. Perhaps most importantly, we know that those who get a college degree are more likely to live longer, happier, healthier lives and to engage civically and civilly within their respective communities. Governor Newsom, we want to thank you for your commitment to workforce development and economic equity and let you know how humbled we are that you've chosen us to be here today. You could have chosen any university, and you selected Stan State. Please know that we are grateful for your support, as I know we share the belief that investing in public higher education is the most powerful way to build a stronger California. I now have the pleasure to introduce our next speaker, my new amigo, Eric Serrato, Merced County Director of Workforce Development. And I'm sorry about my voice. I promise I'm not taking voice lessons from the geese outside. I promise.
Good morning. My name is Eric Serrato, and I'm the convener of the North San Joaquin Valley region and also the director of the Merced County Workforce Board. I'm joined today by Dr. Thomas Pogue of the University of the Pacific and Yolanda Meraz of North Valley Thrive. We are here today to present the governor with our region's California Jobs First plan. The northern San Joaquin Valley has always been a place of growth. Since the Yokuts and the Miwok, across generations of immigration and labor that built this region, the North Valley has been a place where you put a seed in the ground and you harvest the California dream. But amazingly, in all of that time, we've never leaned in as a region to really chart the economic trajectory of our three counties, not until California Jobs First tasked us with the development of an inclusive plan for economic development. And Governor, the plan that we are presenting you today, it's clear and it is decisive. It calls out advanced manufacturing, the bioeconomy, and clean energy as our economic tickets. It commits to working with other partners to help cut red tape, to innovate around water use, to support working parents, and to grow our economy without any of the unnecessary trade-offs that would harm the beauty and the vitality of this incredible living, breathing place. We now more clearly see ourselves as the translation destination. That means that because of our proximity to Silicon Valley and the capital region, because ag is in our DNA, because our availability of land and our unique logistics infrastructure, we are the place, the destination where world-class innovation translates into world-class production. EV battery manufacturing, technology components, climate solutions, new forms of energy, making new consumer products from a sustainably sourced food and ag waste. And we're matching all of this opportunity with skills. Skills in the hands of our women electricians who are gonna build our grid, and the machine mechanics that are gonna keep our production humming. In the Stockton 7th grader who in 15 years will be that UC Merced doctoral student developing the next wave of these products. And that's why, by no surprise, we've been aligning our work with the K-16 Collaborative. That's why our plan mirrors the state's master plan on career education. And it's no surprise that this plan comes from labor leaders, from creatives, from entrepreneurs and industry heads, from community voices, and from the offices of the three county CEOs that guided this work, from a community-based and driven steering committee, from a brilliant team of researchers and economists, a third of which call this place home, Stanislaus State. And although we have spoken to more than 700 community stakeholders, our work has really just begun. Governor, your visit coincides with the next phase of our work, which is to speak even more directly and more deeply with industry to really sharpen up these tactics and work with local partners. It's why we're going to be making $9 million of local grants to feed these strategies and realize their full potential. And it's why we're going to be bringing down more than $1 billion of investment from outside of the region to really fund these strategies. I said we're a place of growth. We grow good jobs, we grow industry, we grow opportunity. And Governor, it is our incredible pleasure and honor to present you with our region's California Jobs First plan.
I'm gonna applaud.
Thank you so much.
A little quick photo. Thank you. Yeah, guys, let's all get in. Thank you, Madam President, and to all of you that took the time to be here. And I will brag on a little bit more, a lot more about build on what Eric just said and what the team put together over the course of a 2-year process. It's wonderful to be here, as the President said and Eric said, on my 6th visit to regions that are now rising together. the manifestation of a launched effort going back a few years. Senator Eggman's here, among others, that was inspired by a recognition that we're all better off and we're all better off and we're all in this together. And I think the spirit of what I wanted to present today is really to advance this work and to make real and make visible a lot of the work that's being done all across the state of California. And so today, my intention is twofold: to not only highlight this 6th Economic and Workforce Development Plan, to highlight the Jobs First initiative more broadly, but also to talk a little bit about California, where we stand today, our fate, as well as our future, and our future often reflected in our values, which are often reflected disproportionately in our investments. And so my second frame of focus is to talk a little bit, preview a little bit, top line preview of next year's budget, a budget that will be formally presented this Friday to the legislature, and a budget that will significantly change over the course of the next number of months, something anybody that's focused on California governance understands, between January and May in the May revise. With that, though, I wanted to sort of revise a little bit of new talking points to elevate the conversation a little bit about the state of California and where we stand. I showcase this first slide because I believe it, and I think the vast majority of Americans believe it. Certainly Californians believe it. We are America, but in the future tense. The future happens here first. We are America's coming attraction. California is the future, and we certainly are the future of the American economy because we're the tentpole of the American economy. We are dominant across so many different sectors. Important to remind people, dominant in the spirit of Eric's comments in manufacturing, dominant in agriculture, dominant in tourism and in trade, in technology, dominant with 32 of the 50 largest market cap AI companies. I can go on and on and on, from two-way trade, direct foreign investment, venture capital, research and development, more scientists, more Nobel laureates, more engineers, more researchers in this state than any other state in America. It is all a point of pride. As well, a point of pride that people are rediscovering their state anew. Record-breaking tourism spend last year, $150.4 billion. A population in California that is growing again, 232,000 new Californians just in the last year. We're seeing a state that has more optimism, not just on the basis of my words, but Moody's themselves just a few weeks ago moving our bond outlook to stable, and a state that doesn't, I think, often get the recognition it deserves. For the first time since 2014, for the first time in over a decade, we now have more Fortune 500 companies in California than Texas and New York. I think that belies some of the misrepresentation often about California. Highlighting just recent announcements, Dickies just announced recently their move of their headquarters from Texas to Southern California. Bosch just announced their securing of $250 million, a new California chip plant in the Roseville region, generating some 700 jobs. Often these are headlines that are overlooked, often misrepresented in some cases. But it is the case that we want to emphasize today, that the state vision as it relates to economic and workforce development is realized locally. It's often said by me, perhaps too often, localism is determinative. And that vision is around focusing on regions, but regions rising together. And that's the spirit, again, of the Jobs First plan. We've invested now $287 million, a process that's unfolded over the course of the last 2 years. Each region, 13 regions in the state of California, received a $5 million planning grant. This distinguishes this effort from any prior effort that's been advanced in California's history. It has been an inclusive process. The plan that we're highlighting today, the North San Joaquin plan, had 200 organizations that participated in its development. 10,000 individuals plus have built these custom-built, as we say, community-led initiatives, bottom-up, not top down, recognizing the distinct and unique characteristics of each of these diverse regions in the state of California. We have been down at the southern part of the state. We were down at the border talking about the Baja Cali region, even going south of the border in terms of extending a narrative of economic and workforce development, trade, and direct foreign investment, nearshoring into the Baja regions, and the opportunities and advantages for the entire southern part of the state. We were up in the northern part of the state in Redding, California, just recently. This includes about 10 specific regions. We have plans at the Redwood Coast. We were initially launched in Fresno, inspired by the Fresno Drive initiative that Senator Eggman and others helped fund and support many, many years ago. Again, a locally driven initiative that really inspired some of this work. And we launched that as the first frame of reference for this 13 specific plan, these 13 specific plans that will all be rolling up and we'll be announcing. They're done, but we want to take a little bit more time and then unveil the larger plan, which will be the State Economic and Workforce Development Plan, again, built and anchored by these 13 specific plans. Eric, thank you for your work. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for breathing life into this region. It gives me great joy. I mean this. I cannot tell you how much I enjoy spending time outside the coast of California, spending time here in the Central Valley, back in the Central Valley, Northern California, Southern California. I remind my friends, Northern California doesn't end at the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, nor does it end right there, the border at Long Beach. There's a whole other state out there, a state that I remind people is the size of 21 state populations combined. And there's tremendous vibrancy and optimism in every part of the state. That said, there are parts of the state that are struggling more than other parts of this state. And again, our state of mind is really focusing on opportunity for all. The spirit that I began with. We've got to reconcile those differences. We got to make sure that people see themselves in the economy. So often we talk about GDP, understandably. California is the 5th largest GDP in the world at $3.86 trillion. But that's an aggregate number, and we don't live in the aggregate. Our experiences are unique and distinctive on the basis of where we lived and our lived experience. People feel anxiety. People don't feel seen. People don't feel heard. And that's precisely why this effort is so impactful and so meaningful. And I extend that again, the long narrative here, personally, because it fills me with pride to hear your pride, not just in the presentation, but in the work product, the pride you have for your community. And that's something I've intentionally wanted to share with the rest of the state because it needs to be shared. People often talk down and past to rural parts of California and to communities like this. And so it is exactly why, Madam President, I'm here. Because we wanted to lift up your extraordinary work. You lifted my spirits by offering the proof, the evidence of what social mobility really looks like, and to the independent analysis that's been done to frame your success. And so your success is our success, and that's the spirit of the Opportunity for All framework. That said, not everyone needs a college education, and I'm mindful of that. While we aspire to provide more opportunity and more support to our community colleges, not just our CSUs and UCs, we have to be mindful not everyone is going to earn a college degree. Not everyone aspires to have a college degree. And we want to make sure those folks feel heard and supported. And so we have been focused working with the legislature. Eric, you referenced it a moment ago as it relates to our career master plan to make sure that everyone feels that they matter, and we care. And the career education plan is also part of this web, this part of the knitting that we're doing to connect these dots. You referenced the K through 16 collaborative. I won't focus on that today, but thank you for your recognition of that work, aligning the universities with regional economic and workforce development. The career education plan takes it to the next level and focuses on apprenticeships. We put out an aggressive plan on apprenticeships a few years ago. It was an audacious stretch goal. It was 500,000 new apprenticeships by 2029. I can announce today on the trajectory we're currently on, this is an actual number, and if you want to have us back into this number, I'm happy to provide that information later. 624,895 apprenticeships, 624,895 that we are currently on track to achieve, well beyond the 500,000 by 2029. We're also focusing on careers in this context. We talk about the career ladder. I don't think it's really a ladder. It's more like a career jungle gym for a lot of people. And so we wanted to level set in that respect, and we wanted to create, the essence, in the vernacular of a passport, something that we can stamp that provides a consciousness of consideration for an employer that you actually have been credentialed. You actually have real work experience, and that includes credit for service for people that are in the military, serving this country. As an example, we unveiled, in partnership, could be anyone's name there, unveils a new effort. The state unveiled an effort for our veterans to turn their military service into a degree. All that basic training, all that hard work, and then you go to a community college, or you get in here, it's the CSU, and you got to start over, even though you have all that basic training. Shouldn't that account for something? And so now we're extending that with the Career Master Plan into opportunities to get a degree and to continue to advance our workforce training in the state. Speaking of advancing that investment, $5.7 billion. People say, well, you need to do more on workforce. I just don't think we really take time to reflect on what we've done. This just in the last few years. $5.7 billion this state has invested, $500 billion, $500 billion in our healthcare workforce, 3.9 education, and then more broadly labor, $1.3 billion. That's just since 2021, by the way. So those are significant, unprecedented investments in California's history, and I recognize good enough never is. We have a lot of gaps. We have a lot more work to do in this space. Now, the work that I have to do to fill the space as it relates to the budget and some top line understanding of where the state is fiscally. And then we'll circle back on some additional issues and values that I just wanted to highlight here today before we head down to Schaefer and discuss the high-speed rail. So here's the top lines on the budget that will be submitted formally this Friday, and the team will present in detail the budget, but the top lines include a balanced budget, no deficits, budget that in a moment I'll highlight not only includes some $17 billion in reserves, but also includes some additional discretionary reserves to provide us more flexibility. You can see $228.9 billion general fund and a state that continues to recognize that we need to do more to save for a rainy day. I'll talk about that at the end of the presentation as it relates to some reforms that we need to advance. We've discussed them. We need to move forward with them, but we have about $17 billion in reserves, including an additional $1 billion. And this is in the January budget. Mindful in May, this may need to increase on the basis of the uncertainties as it relates to the federal administration, as it relates to trade policy or tariff policy or immigration policy that could radically shape and impact the debate in this country, impact our revenue stream in this state. So I'm mindful that number is a number that requires some iteration and constant reconsideration, but it's $1 billion more than was considered last year. We continue to pay down our liabilities. You can see just in the last number of years close to $14 billion to pay down our unfunded healthcare liability and pension obligations, a commitment over the next 4 years to pay down roughly another $10 billion and $2.4 billion in this budget year. You say, well, how can you provide an additional $2.4 billion? It's because of this. Revenues in the state are up $16.5 billion. This is a snapshot, subject to change significantly by May, a snapshot of the revenue projections above and beyond what we had projected last year. A quick reminder of last year. Last year, we endeavored to make this year's budget a non-event. Last year, we endeavored to solve the problems this year and did something we haven't done in the past. We took a 2-year prism as it relates to addressing not just the fiscal challenges in the current fiscal year as it relates to that shortfall that we were closing, but to address the next year's shortfall. And that's why, in so many ways, this budget is familiar. If it's not familiar, I would go back to the May revise. I'd go back to the deliberations within the legislature. It was a 2-year framework. One thing we didn't anticipate, and we're pleased to see, is this revenue increase, again, which is substantial and significant. And again, we're in the midst of the fiscal year. We'll see if that revenue continues, but we're mindful of this chart. And I'll remind people that haven't had a chance to sit through some previous budget presentations that this may be the most important chart. It's the nature of a progressive tax system in California. California has average taxes, plus or minus. Most objective observers would acknowledge California's average tax, except for the volatility for the 1%, where we have a progressive tax structure. And we disproportionately rely on that top earner as it relates to income taxes and capital gains taxes. As a consequence of that, we've seen remarkable volatility. Just in this slide alone, and this is roughly a 2-year period from peak to trough, where you saw a 21% decline in revenue. Here, you'll see it amplified similarly in capital gains. And what's interesting about this slide is there's a 59% delta as it relates to peak to trough on capital gains. You go back to 2019, it was roughly $14.4 billion that the state received in capital gains percentage of personal income. That's the reflection of that percentage you see there. And then it went up. You see the 11.6 right here on top. It went up to $36 billion. What we're seeing now is a leveling. And this is what we had previewed last year. This is what we anticipated last year. You had 2 extreme years of volatility, the likes of which we haven't seen in quite some time in California. And now we're seeing more of the traditional 5-ish% capital gains as a percentage of personal income revenue estimates going out into the future. In fact, this year's, just to put in perspective, I mentioned $14.4 billion, I mentioned $36 billion. That 5.1% that we're projecting in the next fiscal year is roughly $19.6 billion as it relates to capital gains. So more traditional, more historic 5%. But again, the volatility is our friend and our foe. And that's why, a little preview, what we've been talking about the last number of years, we must remove the constraints from Proposition 2 and Proposition 4. Prop 2 was passed in 2014. Prop 4 was passed in 1979. I may not be mistaken by a year or two. And both contribute to our inability to set aside more money during the good years, just as we would, those very familiar with atmospheric rivers, you want to collect as much water as you can so you can use it during the dry years. Not dissimilarly, we need to address that cap as it relates to Prop 2. It needs to at least be doubled to 20%. And we need to make sure that when we contribute to the reserve, it's not considered an expense that it currently is considered under Proposition 4, the appropriations limit. Should be exempted from that. And that's the reform that we need to advance. We need to create the right political conditions to advance it. No one is saying that's easy. That's going to take a Herculean effort. But we've been talking about it for long enough. It's time to move forward. And again, these charts continue to bear out that imperative. We also have an imperative, and that is to meet you where you want us to be. And that's leaner, just like you have been in your household, just like I've been in mine. We all have to be more efficient. We're all taxpayers. We all want to make sure our money is being well invested, not wasted. We want more efficiency. We want more focus on outcomes, not inputs. We'll get to some accountability on homelessness in a moment. And that's why we've been at this for some time. And forgive me, just because I figured this would wake some folks up because we love the contemporary. So much focus has been played on DOGE. I just thought this may get the attention that some of these initiatives have deserved for the last 5 or 6 years. Our DOGE is spelled O-D-I. We created years and years ago with the legislature an Office of Digital Innovation. Now it's Data and Innovation. And it's been focused on a myriad of reforms over the course of many, many years. We didn't wake up to this reality on modernizing our IT systems, on renegotiating contracts, travel, printing, goods and services, state building consolidations, vacant positions. I'll highlight some of the work that's been done in that space. We have new technology, new artificial intelligence, the California or Alert California system that's doing extraordinary work with AI and firefighting, early detection. Public-private partnerships, this is something, again, that deserves recognition. $4.2 billion, 59 large-scale public-private partnerships, $4.2 billion that we brought in from the private sector to advance the cause of Californians, to advance the cause of our values. Fraud protection, $125 billion. After we dealt with across this country unprecedented fraud as it relates to the pandemic and the pandemic unemployment insurance and others, new fraud detection and protection investments that are paying real dividends. Civil service reform. Let me give you an example of civil service reform. Part of the career master plan. Already 30,000 positions in state government, is one of the largest employers in this state, in this country, do not require a college degree. That was part of our civil service reform. In the Career Master Plan, we created a numeric goal and date to more than double 32,000 additional slots that we want to double to advance that reform. We have a digital first framework, the work we're doing to remove as much paper as we can from the engagement or process of getting services delivered in this state. We have a digital first framework. We have more focus on housing accountability. 42 CEQA reforms have been advanced in this state. Lowering healthcare costs, the creation of the Office of Healthcare Affordability created its first numeric goals, first in this country to advance that. What we're doing on CalRx and, of course, AI, which I'll talk about in a moment. You can see here just some of the headlines, Fox News included, some of the work we've done as it relates to surplus land. And Senator, you'll appreciate this. 30,773 units have already been unlocked because of the Surplus Land Act that we advanced together in 2021. We created an office in this state, first time we've ever created, for more accountability, for more affordable housing more broadly. It was an accountability unit that we staffed up, and we now have included homelessness in there. They've taken 540 actions. We're in 4 settlements with cities. And in those 540 actions, it's unlocked 7,773 units of new housing. That, by the way, is a number up through December 2nd. I'm looking forward to updating that number on the basis of what happened the rest of December. We also are looking to, and you see some additional examples here on the screen as it relates to AI and advancing more broadly our healthcare efforts. Healthcare, and you'll see this on Friday, and I've been talking about this with my colleagues all across this country. You're seeing healthcare numbers go through the roof, candidly. in this state as it relates to the number of people that are applying for health care benefits. And those costs are increasing in states, including in the state of California. Again, the team will talk more about that. So the issue of limiting cost increases becomes foundational. We've expanded access. Now we've got to provide more for our dollar, and we need to be more efficient and effective in holding our entire system accountable. That's what the Office of Healthcare Accountability is poised to do. I mentioned a moment ago the work we're doing to try to be more lean. 6,500 positions. This was something we committed to in our 2-year budget. It's a process that's unfolding. Remember, we're in the middle of our fiscal year. We're already have identified 6,500 positions. We're able to score $1.2 billion in savings. So that has already taken shape. Operational savings across the board, travel, insurance, all kinds of issues. We've been able to provide and identify an additional $3.5 billion in savings. Again, all in the spirit of being more effective and more efficient. And speaking of effectiveness, this chart may make no sense to anyone. This may be, I just smile every time I see this. We created something called RFI-2. And if you didn't read about it, it's because no one cared about it. But it completely radically changed procurement in California. This is something I've been promoting for over a decade. I even wrote a book around some components of this, and it was one of the things I promoted and promised. It's hardly perfect, but it's taken place and shape in a way that's actually producing results. 22% decline may not seem like enough, I get it, but already a 22% decline in time on procurement transactions. Just over 1 fiscal year, more in that space. RFI-2, look it up. It's an exciting new approach. Pay for what works, moving stubbornly, still too much RFIs, RFPs, RFQs. Exactly. Just time, delay, bureaucracy, lobbyists, waste, inefficiency, frustration, anger, distrust. That's what all of those things represent. RFI-2 represents a radical departure from that. And speaking of radical departure, I'm not going to say a word about the DMV because a governor that says a word about the DMV gets his hands burned. And I will just point you to Harvard Business Review. Just a few weeks ago, they independently, I've not had the guts to have a little press conference on this because I know where you all will come out all upset, expressing your own terrible experience. But Harvard Business Review, and the headline of that business review is Management by Walking Around, complimenting some of the work that's been done out there. A lot of new mobile offices, not a new online services. We even got those credit cards, which we promoted 5 years ago. Finally, you can use them. The mobile, you can go into your Apple wallet, and you can go into the Google wallet. You finally get a mobile license. I mean, it's really a different system. Remember when I got here, that was one of the things everyone was screaming and yelling about with the Real ID, and the thing was collapsing. So I'm just really proud of the team over there. I'll leave it at that. You can read, you can judge. Again, always a work in progress, humility when it comes to DMV. But when it comes to AI, I mentioned 32 of the top 50 AI market cap companies in the world. By the way, that's a number from 6 months ago. I imagine that number is even more favorable to California and Californians. We continue to dominate in this space, unsurprisingly, because it's a workforce that's unparalleled anywhere in the United States, arguably in the world. The concentration of clusters and the opportunities you feel here in terms of proximity to the Valley, something we'll be highlighting when we talk about the investments that we're making in this economic development plan that happens to be a transportation plan, railway, high-speed rail, but leading on AI, streamlining government. We have 6 active new pilots that we've moved out and partnerships on AI. We're leading the country in this space, and we're doing it not to labor, with labor. Nothing about you without you. We're also creating jobs in the process, in the spirit of labor, and we're doing it with boundaries. We're building it with guardrails. We want to make sure we protect folks. We did dozens and dozens of AI bills that we passed. Thank you again, Senator, your good work on that, and many others that we're working on collaboratively, and many others that I know will be inspired and presented in this new legislative session. You can see just a few of these. So we've great partnership with Jensen and NVIDIA. You can see one of them, AP highlighted this new AI tool that's focused on reducing traffic, primarily in the Los Angeles region, which is an exciting AI project. This is the promise that's been promoted of AI, moving from mobile, local, social, crowd, cloud, search, now to suggest, and generative AI and what this means in terms of more efficient and effective governance and governing. We want to maintain our leadership in this space. Amy Tong and the team have been doing an amazing job. And I'll tell you, you see some of these proposals that have come in under this RFI2 framework. They're very, very exciting. When we talk about the future happens here first, we mean that in every way, shape, or form. We also recognize in order to maintain that status, we have to maintain our competitiveness. I just wanted to highlight just a few brief things. Again, you'll get through the details of the budget with the team on Friday. We want to keep the state competitive. One of the areas we recognize we are not as competitive as once were. It's the world we invented is now competing against us. You can say that about a lot of industries, but notably as it relates to what's happening with our entertainment industry. After the strikes, after the global challenges with COVID, the region hasn't recovered. The economy hasn't recovered. A lot of good, hardworking folks are not working. A lot of blue-collar folks behind the scenes, they need support. And in California, our support in terms of investing in our lead has waned. And as a consequence, states like New York, notably states like Georgia, have significantly higher investments in luring production into their states from the state of California. So we want to put ourselves right back in leadership position, just behind Georgia, but ahead of New York, doubling the film tax credit, and that's also included in this budget. My staff wanted to share this. For what reason, I don't know. Though I did, because I was curious, I did tune into the first pilot episode of Bad Monkey that now has moved back from Florida to California. And if you can get over the severed arm, it's a pretty good show. And we're very proud of them. So thank you to Bad Monkey for making the right decision, moving back to California. Look, we want to keep California safe. We want to keep it clean. These have been narratives we've been focused on for years. We want to continue to maintain that discipline and focus. But the word of the year for me is about accountability. And we just have to drive accountability. The state has done a lot and a lot more than it's ever done. But we began, as I will end, state's visions realized locally across the spectrum of issues. There's 478 or so cities, plus or minus, 58 counties, different school boards, 1,050-ish school boards. We love flexibility. We love localism. We love, inclusivity and process. But we need to drive accountability. And so we'll talk a lot more about that in the next few months. We will be announcing something I'll preview here in a moment in the next few minutes. But I'll start with safety because it's foundational. It's important to note, working with the legislature, we've invested $1.6 billion to focus on public safety, leading the nation in efforts and grants, vertical prosecution grants, investigation grants, tech grants, grants for new technology, to invest in addressing this change that we saw taking shape sort of post-COVID as it relates to organized retail theft rings and platforming on third parties, these smash and grab groups, et cetera. And you can see just since 2022, these are additional incremental investments that had never been made in the past that were made over the course of the last number of years. And you will have the opportunity to talk to the team on Friday about where we are in terms of those multi-year investments moving forward. I'm not naive about where crime is in this state, including this part of the state. I'll be going down, driving through Kern County, which has one of the higher murder rates in the country, not just in the state of California. But I don't say that take a cheap shot. I make the point to make the point that we're experiencing different realities as it relates to crime and violence in the state. And as a consequence, those grants that went out to sheriffs, to DAs, went out equally in every part of this state, including North State, southern part of the state, and in Central Valley. But here's some reasonably good news. Violent crime in Oakland, we've been doing the CHP operations. We just extended them. LA, San Francisco, where we initiated some of those CHP operations and worked with our National Guard, with our JAGs on the prosecution. Some of those cases, you could see some good numbers. Don't take my word for it. You can see some of the headlines. San Francisco sees historic drop in violent crime last year, over a homicide rate dropping in Los Angeles, and you're seeing some violent crime numbers moving finally in the right direction in places like Oakland. But again, I could show you headlines that show a little bit different trend lines depending on parts of the state. But we continue to drive hard to do more, and that's why we have all these new laws that just went into effect just a few weeks ago. Targeting smash and grabs, fighting car break-ins. That was something that we needed to update. Legislature, we worked 12 bills. We're going to do more on increasing enforcement and prosecutions, cracking down on the theft of stolen items on third-party platforms, and obviously combining aggregating values of felony thresholds, but also allowing multi-jurisdictions to do the same as well. Flexibilities. By the way, flexibilities that have been highlighted by a number of reports. We're grateful for the recognition of the state's efforts on this. And I'll just highlight the California Retailers Association. Its president said California is a national model in combating organized retail crime. We recognize we have a lot of work to do in that space. Our commitment is firm and resolved, just as it is to keeping the state clean. $1.22 billion invested in the last few years. It was $90 million a few years prior. $1.22 billion. Clean California. Thank you to the legislature for truing that up. Thank you for local government for becoming partners. Here's one. Fresno, for example, is now one of our formal partners as a clean community. We've designated, just as we do pro-housing communities, clean communities. They'll be eligible for additional funding and grants. You've got a volunteer corps, and you've got a formal workforce. The formal paid workforce, 18,000 under this proposal. So we promoted this, we promised it, and it's moving forward, and we're grateful just because. Here's some examples, and I say just because personally I've been going out doing this, and so it's a little more personal and points of pride for me doing some of these cleanups. I had 4 more slides. My staff said enough. I'll skip to accountability and then wrap things up after I talk a little bit more about education, Doctor. Let's talk about accountability. We're rolling out a new website. We have been working on this for, it seems like forever. I mean, to the extent a website can enliven your senses, distill you with a sense of well-being, create some optimism, this is the website. Well, there's 2. I'll highlight one other. But this one in particular, it's a preview. I'll just leave it static. Thursday or Friday, they're going to roll it out in detail. It's an accountability website, the likes of which the state has never provided. Thousands and thousands and thousands of inputs, updated and organized in a way that real people can access it and understand it, focused on these 3 core pillars of stress and focus, frustration in California: homelessness, housing, and behavioral health. As an example, you can see how there's no homicide. You can go to every county in the state of California. You can see if their PIT numbers, their point-in-time counts are up or down, sheltered, unsheltered. You can see how they're doing. You can compare the PIT counts to your county. You can see are our numbers going up or our numbers going down. On the housing side, you can see if these people are focused on your needs, on updating their housing element. Are they going to meet their RENA goals? These are words that don't necessarily resonate with most folks, but they matter to me, and I think ultimately impact you. We have focus on the pro-housing jurisdictions, which I referenced, and a focus, again, on just recognizing what counties have committed to and which ones are actually doing the work they committed to. Perfect example on the behavioral health. Are you fully implementing Care Court? Are you fully implementing the conservatorship reform? A lot of folks, they don't have to wait till 2026. Let's go. Senator Eggman, her law, let's go. So that's a red dot. I didn't put there's a lot of red dots there, Senator. But it's time to expose. I think it's the old disinfectant, sunlight. It's the best, reform. It's about measurement and accountability. So driving on those three critical issues, unprecedented investments in behavioral health, unprecedented. Prop 1 investments on top of those unprecedented investments. Everything we've done on housing, which is unprecedented in this state, and homelessness. Time to see accountability at the local level. We're going to drive that accountability. And that includes on moving encampments. We want these encampments cleaned up. It's $750 million in encampment resolution grants. That's not out of sight, out of mind. That's not just whack-a-mole. That's about a resolution. That's why they're called encampment resolution grants. Resolve the underlying issue, but move effectively and efficiently. And so that's going to be a big part of our focus. And on infrastructure, we're also not moving away from our commitment. I just think this is a big deal. We have not seen investments in our infrastructure, the likes of which we are investing in our infrastructure since the 50s and 60s. I have people come to me all day, well, California was a great state, young man, in the 50s and 60s. And I said, what made it great? They said, well, we invested in infrastructure. I said, well, what about the work we're doing? They said, what do you mean? I said, well, we created a new website, build.ca.gov. Take a look at it. $180 billion of investments over the next 10 years. 400,000 jobs. You may not be interested in jobs, sir, but take a look at the number of dollars that are at work today. Well, where are those dollars going? Well, clean energy, roads. Well, I'm for broadband, clean air. You go to this website, build.ca.gov. Again, it's not dissimilar to the homeless and the behavioral health and housing website. You can go by county and project. 16,000 active projects. 16,000 active infrastructure projects. See where we are, but also see where we're going. And speaking of where we're going, and I'll end with the next few slides, it's all about education. It's all about human capital, not just physical capital. And so I wanted just to update you, because it's relevant to the budget. The things we firmly committed to in our 2-year budget that we're holding the line in this year's budget. At peril. When I say unprecedented, people's eyes roll over. Significant investments in areas where the state has lagged, and now the state leads most, if not all, other states. First, let's level set. The budget this year, we're projecting into the new fiscal year, subject to change in May. It's $118.9 billion, and that is the Prop 98 funding, which is always a headline number in the budget. Second question we get is per pupil. Where are we? I always love putting a slide because I think it's interesting to see where we were a decade ago. $14,240, $24,764 today per pupil. People often ask, well, what's the Prop 98 per pupil? There's those dollars we're highlighting, but getting close to $25,000. The COLA this year, 2.43, which under the LCFF is an important number for educators and for the system. But here's the transformation that's taking place. Again, thank you to the legislature. Thank you to the Pro Tem McGuire. Thank you to our leader in the Assembly, our Speaker, Rivas, and thank you to the previous leaders. These are unprecedented investments in the before and after school. There was a time in this state where we talked about after school for all, and we invested $100 million, $200 million. Impressive. We're fully fulfilling that vision. $4.4 billion, reimagining the school day, not just the school year, summer school, after school for all, extending the school day. Universal TK. We talked about this. There are a lot of states where we're going to expand our investments in young folks. If you want to deal with the achievement gap, you got to focus on the opportunity gaps, and you got to close those gaps before people get into kindergarten, because those gaps manifest even before kindergarten. So pre-kindergarten, early childhood education is foundational. $2.4 billion. You saw the universal school meals, first state in the country, regardless of your income, no shame, no one asked, full, now increasingly nutritious meals twice a day universal. In our schools, the arts investments, music, thank you to the voters for advancing a baseline on that, and issues of equity, which are foundational. Thank you again to the legislature, the Black Caucus, and others led the effort there, maintaining those investments to close those gaps. But let's talk about universal transitional kindergarten this year. Will be done. We've got universal school meals fully implemented this year. Will be done. We focus on before and after school. The multi-year commitment will be fulfilled, done. The focus on those with reading disabilities, Exhibit A, the guy you're looking at right here who hasn't looked at a speech because it is not a strength of mine. The early screening, the dyslexia screening we announced last month, fully implementing that, and we'll be talking in the next few months about the next level investments we're making in high-dose tutoring, what we're doing on literacy in this state and addressing that risk. But the commitment on that screening is done. And then behavioral health. We talk about it broadly. We talk about it for those that are chronically ill. We talk about people in the streets and sidewalks, not enough on prevention and wellness for our kids, looking at wellness centers to deal with physical and adolescent mental health, $4.1 billion investing in those programs. That was a commitment we made. We were in the Central Valley when we announced that. We're back announcing that this year that commitment will be substantially fulfilled. So that's the broad strokes of the budget. I just saw these images. I said, let's put them on a screen and make me feel happy because I'm proud of this state. I'm proud of the people in this state. I'm proud of the state's resilience. I'm proud of our remarkable diversity. I'm proud of the strength that our diversity provides, but I'm also mindful in closing, and I put this up to make a sober contrast. We're also walking into headwinds, radically different moment in U.S. history, world history, arguably. And as a consequence, we need to be prepared, and I hope you recognize that this budget reflects a foundational focus. While it's aspirational in many respects, it's also just driving accountability. It's about more transparency, it's about reform, and it's about being prepared for uncertainties into the future. And that's why I'm very optimistic about the future of this state as well. I'll close this version, not of a state of the state, but a state of mind, by thanking Eric, you again, and Madam President, to your team, to our partners at University Pacific, and of course, UC Merced, not just I like Stan State, and Senator Eggman for being here, and everyone that is making real that promotion and that promise of California and our fate and future. And thank you for your latest addition to that with this 6 regional jobs first plan that I've had the privilege of receiving over the course of the last 6 weeks or so. With that, we're happy to answer any questions.
Hi, Governor. Ashley Zavala with KCRA 3. I know you mentioned businesses really early on in the state's economy in the beginning of this presentation. Right now, businesses in California are shouldering an extra $1,000, $10,000, $100,000 in some cases because the state did not pay back its debt to the federal government for UI. I know you addressed this a couple of weeks ago. I know you mentioned that you have tried to put billions in to pay down that debt so that they don't shoulder so much, but what in this budget can businesses expect to maybe alleviate that situation? Well,
it's a familiar situation. We experienced this after the last recession. During the Schwarzenegger years, it was ultimately fully paid back. It's a process that's familiar to businesses, including myself, with hundreds and hundreds of employees. In a blind trust, I recognize, but something I'm intimately familiar with in the past and in the present. As it relates to the $21 billion or so, that was the impact of the pandemic. It's an impact that's been felt in many states across this country. You're right to recognize over the course of 2 previous budgets, I had attempted to work with the legislature to invest billions of dollars to paying down that unfunded liability. We were unsuccessful in doing so. There were other priorities the legislature felt was more important. We have made it clear in conversations with leaders, the legislature, the importance of paying this down, the importance of reforming the program, but we've left it silent in the January budget to your specific question as we negotiate the terms of that between now and May.
And then just one other quick question. You mentioned crime. Voters made clear to you in the legislature that they wanted Proposition 36 to go into effect. I know you said over and over again there are no dollars attached to it, but there is an expectation that you in the legislature find a way, from some, that you in the legislature find a way to make sure that it can be effective. So is there anything that you can say on?
Well, you'll learn more about that on Friday. We are absolutely committed to implementing the terms that were established by the voters. And so that commitment remains firm. That commitment, as you know, will require cuts in certain programs from savings that would otherwise be accrued under Prop 47. So that is reflected in the budget. And then as it relates to ongoing commitments related to other aspects of it, including the prospect of not shuttering some of the beds and units, as well as potentially not shuttering an additional prison, that also is reflected in this year's budget.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Governor. Thanks for taking the time today before you head to Kern County. Aton Wallace here with Next Star Stations. I'm going to ask, just because we're talking Toplines here, just want to make sure, just generally, just going to ask it, can you guarantee that this budget will not increase taxes?
Well, as long as I'm around, I'm going to fight hard against that. As you know, I've been against many of these proposals over the course of the last number of years. No, there'd be no need. Now, the bottom could completely fall out. Trump could impose 60% tariffs against China, could impose across-the-board 20% tariffs. He can move to deport millions and millions of undocumented Americans, or at least undocumented people living in America, and impact millions more mixed-status families, many that include American citizens. That impact could impact the labor market, could impact interest rates that could potentially go up, inflation that could go up. He could also incorporate $2 trillion, as he professes, in cuts to social services. Disproportionately would have to come from social services to achieve a $2 trillion savings. And that would radically change our outlook. Thus the frame January to May, some flexibility, but absolutely not subject to anything along those lines. I will be holding the line against any taxes.
Thank you. Second question is, speaking of actually looking ahead way before May, just before the Trump inauguration, how are you feeling about the timing of the special session? Do you feel like the $25 million you want to see allocated to the Attorney General will get there before January 20th?
Legislative leaders have been exceptional. Members of the legislature have been exceptional. I think universally they recognize the stakes of the game. Many that were here a few years prior intimately understand the 122 lawsuits we're involved in with the Trump administration, and understand even as we were working with the Trump administration, they were still assaulting our values and programs and hard-earned rights under the law. And so we should anticipate nothing less than that. But we're hopeful that none of that transpires, that we don't have to spend a dollar of the $25 million. Open hand, always, not a closed fist. But no, I have all the confidence in the world based upon very contemporary conversations with leadership that we're going to land where we need to, get that done before the 20th. That was the idea, get it done before the 20th, and make sure that we're prepared for the worst and hoping for the best.
Hi, Governor. Laura Fitzgerald with CAP Radio in Sacramento. I wanted to follow up on that last question. You know, at the beginning of your presentation for the budget, you referenced the special fund for economic uncertainty, and I know you also have your special session going on. Could you explain maybe what there, in terms of lessons learned during the first Trump administration that informed how you went about allocating these funds this time around, and what you think could be different this time?
I mean, it's not lost on me. The sort of proverbial elephant in the room on my way down to Kern, as was just said, talk about the high-speed rail. Be remiss if I didn't talk about the money. I think it was, and forgive me, and I may be off, this is, I think it was $926 million or so. It was close to $1 billion that they rated of committed dollars for the high-speed rail. It took years to get that back. We were able to get that back. So that gives you a sense of our sensibilities. He's been talking about, he's celebrating the leadership of governors that celebrated the fact they did not expand Medicaid in their states. He's celebrating the fact that they intend to eliminate the Department of Education. He's celebrating the leaders of this Doge that are talking about $2 trillion in cuts. You can't cut $2 trillion without literally gutting entitlements. So that's a level of uncertainty that's next level uncertainty. We're looking at the kind of uncertainty in the context of the SFEU, which is a reference to that $4.5 billion that I made, which was $3.5 billion, so additional $1 billion on just timing and flexibility. He's not a dictator. They assert dictatorial points of view, but he's not. There still is the rule of law, still a court system, still due process. And so you can threaten, as Trump has consistently done, that he will not provide people in the Central Valley relief, businesses, and individual relief for emergency. He won't provide suppression dollars in the midst of an emergency for law enforcement and firefighters. He may deny that, but ultimately those federal dollars will be recovered. But in that process of recovering them, we want some flexibility in terms of the state's cash position. I think that's more reflected in what we're trying to do in terms of our budget, is just provide more flexibility so that we have a posture, if we need to push back against those assaults, and we have the ability to weather those assaults. What you see with the president-elect is, fire and fury often signifying something. You see fire and fury often signifying nothing. And you have to sort of work through all of that, again, based upon my own experience. And we do that, I think, from a position of strength, because, again, we're not only the fifth largest economy in the world, but size of 21 state populations combined, we're the 10th pole of the American economy, and we have cash positions unlike any other state in the country, and I want to maintain those positions so that we can push back.
Hi, Governor. Daniela Pardo with Spectrum News. I know you're headed to D.C. later this week to attend former President Carter's memorial service, but I'm curious, what else are you hoping to accomplish during your time there? What specific requests do you have to the Biden administration for California?
It's a good question. So we are finishing the job of getting all these waivers and making sure that we're getting all these reimbursements. Very relevant. I appreciate the bookmark of these two questions. There's remaining FEMA dollars that are out there that are owed to the state that presumably President-elect can sweep, and then we litigate. We're trying to get all of those dollars to the extent we can to the states, including California. Working with other governors in this respect to make sure that we are reimbursed for what we are owed as states. We're hardly the only state that's owed billions and billions of dollars. So I'll be there just finishing that job. We got this unbelievable waiver called BH Connect, which I'll be talking about another time because it deserves its own day of attention in the perfect world. But our attention spans are limited. But it's an exciting waiver that needs to be highlighted as one of the waivers we've already received. There's a lot of other really novel strategies and waivers that we're hoping that we get done. And so we're just down the last few weeks. I'll see the president tomorrow. I'll see President Biden tomorrow. And I'll have a chance to talk to him about these things. We'll be visiting the White House on Thursday, not Thursday because I think they're closed. Everyone's closed on Thursday. We'll be at the memorial, and then Friday morning we'll be following up with a series of meetings just on loose ends. And forgive me for the long-windedness. I just, in categories, still some healthcare work, and primarily in the EPA environmental side as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Governor. Sophia Bolag here from the San Francisco Chronicle. I just wanted to clarify, you said that there's no deficit. Obviously, the plan you're putting forward is balanced, as it is required to be. But are you predicting any sort of a surplus? Is that what the projections show?
I guess you could argue there's a modest surplus, but it's in the margin.
Okay.
So no deficit. We don't. Again, the LAO had a number. We have our number. we have the benefit of all our expenditures as well, and contemporary knowledge on the basis that they put that report out a few weeks ago, and we're putting ours out this Friday. They'll talk more about the details, but no, we're not in a position to have to make any adjustments that are of significance compared to what was announced last year in the 2-year budget. We're actually able to land it in a very good place. Not significant commitments to new ongoing money, significant commitments to accountability, transparency, and results in this budget is how I broadly would define the more broad spirit of the budget, and maintaining fiscal discipline in a time of deep uncertainty.
Got it. And just wanted to follow up, you mentioned the Doge department or project that the Trump administration.
I can't wait for the post-analysis of this in a few years.
Are there specific areas where you are particularly concerned that effort could have a specific impact on the California budget?
Well, I mean, you had, they already came out saying they want to try to eliminate one of the competitors of Tesla. And this is the guy who's the co-chair of Doge, with the person who founded Tesla. I mean, in any other world, you couldn't make that one up, and press would have stopped and everyone would have paused and gone, what the hell's going on with this country? That's a California-based company, Rubina, where they threatened to take back a $6 billion loan. So we're just in uncharted territory. And I say uncharted, mindful, again, I don't want to keep talking about, I rarely do, a book I wrote a decade ago. It's a space I care deeply about. I've always cared about it. I talked about taking the town square digital, talked about reinventing government. I started my work as a county supervisor, sort of mirroring a lot of the work that Al Gore did with Rego at the time. I mean, I think this is a deeply important space. Strategic plans, customer service plans I did, outcome-based measures. So it's an area of commitment. It's what our ODI was all about. That's what our RFI2 is about. So I love all that. I think that's all wonderful. I think it's critical, in fact. More choice, more voice, meet people where they are. And I talked about government as a platform, not as a vending machine. That was the metaphor I used in the framework of that book. So to the extent they advance those principles, I embrace it. If they talk about eliminating billions and billions of dollars to Medicaid, that's a different conversation. If they gut the Department of Education, special needs, we put $3.8 billion in special education the last few years to try to address the gaps there. I've got a different response. So that's how I'm looking at things. But the idea of making government more efficient, it's about time, is my point. Many administrations have done this. It's hardly novel to Donald Trump. It's just they named it in a different way, and they named to one billionaire and another very wealthy person to run it. And so it just has its own question marks surrounding it. I'm trying to be fair. Anyway, thank you for the question.
Governor Andrew Oxford from Bloomberg, you talked about wanting reforms to Prop 4 around the GAN limit. Can you elaborate a little bit on what you'd like those changes to look like, and particularly the timeline around which?
Well, it's pretty simple. We just need to go back to the voters, increase from 10% to 20%, and then make sure that the investments into a rainy day reserve are not considered expenses under Prop 4. Simple as that.
And just real quick, does this budget anticipate the funding for an agreement with Google around journalism funding? Is that incorporated into
this? I think I'll leave that to the team on Friday to get into the weeds and details, but there's no status quo change in terms of that fundamental direction. But the details of that, they'll lay out on Friday. Appreciate the question. Especially a journalist asking that question. That seems appropriate.
Governor Blake Jones with Politico. Excuse me. Could you put a number to that modest surplus you were talking about?
No. It's within a margin. They'll do that on Friday. I'm leaving you with a Friday conversation. Gives you something to look forward to. But it was a 2-year budget. We would try to land a balanced budget in the year 2, and we've done that within the margin. And we're on the plus side of the margin, not the downside of the margin.
And One other thing, I know, a couple of months ago you said that you were considering setting aside money in case President-elect Trump withholds disaster relief. Has your thinking evolved on that at all, and have you thought about how much it's wise to reserve?
Well, that's reflected in the SFEU. That was reflected in the true up of $1 billion, and it was also reflected in my comments about that $4.5 billion, which is for the uncertainties, the $4.5 billion. I also made this point when I discussed it a moment ago, that is subject to iteration and change. I think I looked over there when I used the word iteration. Over the course of the next few months, based upon what Trump actually does versus what he says he's going to do. And where we are in the next few days as it relates to getting those FEMA dollars that are already owed to the state. So it's, I think January, this budget that we're advancing on this week, I think May will look arguably very different as it relates to that question.
Devin Truby with ABC 10. You mentioned high-speed rail a few times today. We're expecting legislation that would cut funding to the project. Can you share why?
Who's doing that? Oh, Trump, maybe, yeah. Well, that's golden oldie, yeah. No, I love that question, and I want to answer that at the right location. I want to encourage you. I don't mean to, I don't, unless you may be busy today, but come on down and join us. I've got a whole presentation. We got an exciting group of people. We have some new things to announce. Not that I don't want to overstate it, but I thought it was important in the spirit of accountability and transparency to update people on where we are. And then we could talk a little bit more what we anticipate, which are golden oldies, frankly, just big yawns from the Trump administration. Thank you.
Hi, Governor Tran Nguyen with the AP. Today you proposed a balanced budget, potentially modest surplus, but we have major uncertainty ahead with the new incoming administration. The LAO also forecasts major budget deficit in incoming years. What are your vision beside Prop 2 and Prop 4 to address that and to set the state up?
Yeah, we do it all the time. I mean, I'm old enough to remember that there rare was an exception where in the out years there wasn't projected deficits, meaning I think you go back decades. That's sort of the nature of budgeting, and I remember that as a local elected as well. So you just make adjustments. I like the 2-year prism last year. I think May, you're going to see a lot more. This is a little preview from me in terms of sort of leaning in more to those out years, but I want to do it in the spirit of collaboration and cooperation with the legislature. So we'll be discussing that a little bit more. Those out years, again, that's just typical budgeting you see at the local and state level, and it's our requirement. We have a requirement to balance our budget. So we will submit balanced budgets, and we'll try to do so by preserving our values and expanding on our commitments. And I think what you saw today, I hope those, at peril when someone does a slide that says done, immediately the editors are calling the reporter saying, oh, don't forget those 4 things. We can come back and prove them otherwise in a year. I'm not naive about that, but those were multi-year commitments, and we're fulfilling our part of the bargain. But there'll still be more work to do. But there's a lot of adjustments that will be made in May, and I'll just end on this with the question. We really have to see what fire and fury comes from Trump in the next few weeks and really get a sense. He's made a bold commitment on a single bill to continue tax cuts that, at least by some projections over the course of their lifetime, would benefit the wealthiest. 86%, in fact, of the tax cut benefiting the wealthiest among us and corporations. He wants to extend that. He also somehow wants to eliminate taxes on tips. And he wants to address the deficit, and he's going to address your grocery bills. And he's going to impose tariffs, and he's going to deport millions of people. So, we'll see how he does all these things. I think most of it was all day 1, so day 2 should be interesting. And see what it means in terms of our posture. And again, May will reflect a very different mindset, also different understanding, and a different budget.
Hi, Governor. Another question related to the unemployment insurance debt. Last month, the LAO put out a proposal for a restructuring of the program that included expanding the taxable wage base and sharing the burden between the general fund and businesses to pay back that debt. Have you had a chance to look at that proposal? Is it something that you're open to considering? And are you working this year to come up with a broader plan forward for the state to pay back that money?
Yeah, as you know, I'm very familiar with what they put out, familiar with other ideas as well. There have been a number of ideas presented. Again, this is a very familiar, forgive me for, I was here 10 years ago when we had similar discussions, roughly $10 billion shortfall at the time. Ultimately was paid back, and they worked through different proposals, never really advanced many. And working with the legislature to see what we can do. We wanted to put billions of dollars down during the surplus years. So this is not a novel topic for me. It's not a topic that we're unfamiliar with. And so we'll continue to work with the legislature. That's the key here. This will be our third attempt to see if we can make some progress. It's a different makeup, different legislature, different moment, different time. And we're hopeful we can find some common ground between now and the end of the fiscal year.
But are you specifically open to broader changes like those suggested in that layout to restructure the fund given the insolvency that exists within it right now?
Yeah, not dissimilar to conversations and conditions that persisted a number of years back. We'll continue to work with the legislature and see if we can advance an effort to address the concerns. I'm not going to negotiate in public the difficult private conversations that we've already had on this topic going back years. They will continue over the course of the next months, may extend to the next few years. We'll see. With that, is that it? Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you I love Stan State. Thank you for having us here, and everybody, thank you for coming out. We'll see you all down at the High Speed Rail press conference.